Hello, dear one. I'm so delighted that you are here with me in this beautiful moment of now. I've got a tropical forecast update for you. This is Mercury moving into Cancer, and this is a big one. And I'd like to feature in this episode the tropical lens as Mercury moving into Cancer is happening in only the tropical chart. We're going to look through this lens with Tier 1 humanity and Tier 2 disciples. For those of you that are initiates, these are great to understand as well, because you're going to get to be refreshed to how these energies affect the collective and how you can continue to receive and essentially anchor the beauty of the energy into the 3D Earth grid. So Mercury moves into Cancer on June 1st at 4:55 a.m. Pacific time. Now, obviously, in moving into 0 degrees, we are talking about the first decan and the very, very early degrees of that first decan. And anytime we move into a new sign, moving through that 0 degree ingress, the unawakened ego, or essentially Tier 1 unawakened humanity, it feels like a clumsy, almost sudden shift in the matrix weather. And it normally triggers new emotional habits as they're stumbling into the Cancerian room. For the disciple, 0 degrees is that pristine threshold. It's really a deliberate initiation, if you will, and a fresh influx of energetic raw material, for lack of better words, to be synthesized and consciously wielded, and especially in their hero's journey, slaying those monsters. Now, Mercury is like the fiber optic cable, the network architect, if you will. And as Mercury is entering basically the watery domain of Cancer, and Cancer is really the foundational layer. So Mercury is going to go in and essentially wire the communication lines and gathering the data to pour into Cancer's concrete mixer, if you will, and building that shell. So think about it that way. Cancer being a water sign and also part of the cardinal cross, it is also the womb of mass redemption. And when we're talking about the planetary rulers, the orthodox ruler for Cancer is the moon. But the esoteric rulers, both at the disciple and the hierarchical or initiate level, are both Neptune. So let's unpack this first for Tier 1, essentially unawakened humanity, the unawakened ego, or the matrix. Mercury is essentially entering this boundaryless emotional water space of Cancer. This is when the unawakened ego's mental body and communication get instantly tangled and entangled into the loop of essentially the drowning martyr. So what this sounds like from the matrix experience, talking about unawakened humanity, things like, I absorb everyone else's traumas to feel needed. I bleed with the wounded, and I take on the heavy toxic baggage of my partners or my friends or my family, and I call it empathy while secretly resenting them for draining me. So essentially the ego misuses this 0 degrees freshness by leveraging Mercury's data gathering function to over communicate emotional victimhood and anxiously hoarding toxic connections, all while building a essentially matrix shell out of all of these grievances to basically hide within or hide under. But if we shift and look at Tier 2, the perspective of the disciple, obviously you're entering at 0 degrees, so this is that first decan. But as we've reversed our wheel, we are looking ahead to the 3rd decan. So you're looking essentially right into that room where the monster that's in decan 3 of your hero's journey that you get to slay is waiting for you. So let's talk about the monster. Who's the monster? The monster is the ego's codependency and the need to play a savior. Those are the traits of this monster. So the disciple really must voluntarily walk into this stage 1, basically the crucible, thinking about decan 3, and truly deeply auditing where the following is happening. Where do you feel entirely boundaryless? Where do you feel raw and victimized? Where do you find yourself drowning in the collective's pain? And where do you play a savior, oftentimes to avoid yourself? In what ways, in what areas? To master this ingress and prepare for your monster battle, you leverage Neptune, who is the esoteric ruler of universal love, to elevate your mind above the moon's reactive shell. So what this sounds like for a disciple: I am actively wielding the sword of fierce boundaries. I am extracting myself from toxic, codependent relationships and situations that trigger toxic codependency. I am facing reality entirely sober. I am not running. I am not avoiding. And I'm learning to embody being a safe harbor for those that need it without bleeding with the wounded. So essentially, if we look again at tier 1, tier 1, unawakened ego, unawakened humanity, uses Mercury and Cancer to frantically swim in the toxic swamp of generational trauma, verbally bleeding out with the wounded, and then subsequently building a shell of resentment, where the disciple leverages Mercury in Cancer to wield the sword of fierce boundaries, embodying a safe harbor for universal truth. It's essentially not drowning in the emotional data of the collective, the emotional feelings, but instead being the unbreakable lighthouse for yourself and for them. And then as we look at the rulers of Cancer, so the exoteric or tropical ruler is the moon, where the esoteric for tier 2, for disciples, is Neptune. And in this case, Neptune is also the highest hierarchical ruler for initiates as well. So when we're looking at the orthodox ruler of the moon, what's really interesting is that Master DK teaches a really profound secret, that the physical moon is basically a dead planet, and it serves instead as a veil for a stargate. And it also fundamentally acts as a prison of the soul. I feel like that's reminiscent of like being and feeling like you're in an emotional prison. It's because it represents the karmic past, the physical body, as well as the instinctual inherited reactions of the mass consciousness, the collective consciousness. So the moon's role is really to build that shell, and what we refer to in Cancer, right? Hiding in its shell. It governs the unawakened human in tier 1 by keeping them entirely tethered to the emotional world through emotional survival. So when the moon is the ruler, the ego is highly reactive, and it's active, it's building its shell, building hard walls of defense to protect its soft, wounded interior. It is the ultimate domain of codependency, where the human, the unawakened human, cannot separate their own feelings from essentially the swamp of the collective. But as we step into the esoteric ruler of Neptune, things shift. According to Master DK, Neptune is the planet of pure, oceanic, universal love. So where the moon is trying to build its hard protective shell, essentially to build the barrier between you and I, or me from you, Neptune almost arrives as a universal solvent to gently begin to dissolve that shell, dissolve the barrier, the separation. And then it elevates the human from the personal mother, which sounds like protecting my blood, protecting my family, protecting my feelings, to the universal mother, which is loving the entirety of humanity without attachment. So Neptune is kind of like the contractor, if you will, my affectionate term, of universal love. And its tool really is kind of like the concrete mixer pouring into building a safe harbor. So the disciple must invoke Neptune to do this heavy lifting, do this heavy dissolving, and then leverage Neptune's high frequency compassion to step out of the moon toxic bleeding heart and fixation really on martyrdom. So with Neptune, the disciple learns to feel the pain of the world, the collective consciousness, without drowning in it and transmuting their own watery vessel into a flawless, transparent filter for the collective. So overall, Mercury moving into Cancer is a volatile threshold. Mercury is either going to be weaponized by the moon to endlessly communicate past trauma, generational trauma, collective trauma, and further reinforcing that hardened shell between us, the boundary, the separation. Or it will be leveraged by Neptune to channel the profound universal empathy that is required to build a new sovereign harbor. So that's it for this little mini update. I've got more updates coming. They post just about every day or so. This way, you can learn to leverage the energy of the stars to power your own personal red pill experience of slaying your monsters, aka your hero's journey, to ascend and transcend the matrix and step into the sidereal stars, becoming that bridge to bring the heavens and anchoring them here into the grid. If you're interested in learning more about your chart as well as the chart energies, I'll put all the links in the show notes below. From my heart to yours, namaste.